Overcoming emotional eating through portion control. Are you still dealing with eating food even though you're not even hungry? Are there still times when it feels like food is practically calling your name? Are there moments when food seems to be like your only comfort? If so, you're in the right place. Hi there, Eve here from Vitamin Eve Nutrition Counseling. And today we're going to talk about how to use portion control to help you overcome emotional eating. But before I get started, I just want to remind you to like this video and to be sure to comment. So let's jump in. Some people call this overeating, some people call emotional eating, mouth hunger, compulsive eating, non-hunger eating. Whatever you call it really doesn't matter. But healing this aspect of your food is key to reaching many of your health and wellness goals. Because overeating of any kind, when done frequently enough or extensively enough, could sabotage your best efforts because it could have significant impacts on your well-being. Let me explain. Emotional eating, or using food to cope, can impact your physical health if it happens too often or if you're going too far beyond what your body needs. Also, foods that are typically used emotionally tend to be higher in fat, sugar, sodium, preservatives, and even though I don't have problems with including these foods, when eaten in excess, it could definitely negatively impact your health. Also, emotional eating can impact your mental health. Turning to food to deal with emotion often stems from an inability to cope with your feelings. And I want to note, we all may eat emotionally from time to time, or we may all overeat from time to time. However, relying on food as your only crutch can make negative emotions even worse and create a cycle of guilt and shame, which can negatively impact your mental health. Finally, emotional eating could impact your wallet. Emotional eating can be costly, especially with rising food costs and rising medical prices these days. Using food as a coping mechanism may lead to unnecessary expenses around food or even health costs, further straining your budget. So here are 3 ways you could utilize portion control to combat emotional eating effectively. Tip number 1 is to maintain adequate nutrition by eating adequate portions throughout the day. Having adequate nutrition is so key here because if you're too hungry or if you're malnourished, I could almost guarantee you will be emotional, and I could almost guarantee that you will overeat. So be sure to include a variety of what your body needs, like proteins, carbohydrates, fats, fruits and vegetables, calcium sources. For example, I had a client that I was working with that didn't believe in having carbs, but somehow found herself feeling out of control and using carbs emotionally. So in our work together, she started experimenting with having some carbohydrate foods during the day. To her surprise, on days that she would have carbohydrates, she was significantly less likely to use food to deal with her feelings of insecurity that would show up around her friends and her family. So take a moment to reflect for yourself. Are you eating enough nutritious foods? I mean, when was the last time you had a vegetable? Do you ever eat calcium-rich foods? How often? How about heart-healthy fats? It could be helpful to have a registered dietitian, nutritionist help you with this if you're not sure if you're getting adequate nutrition. Tip number 2 is to incorporate moderation with those enjoyable foods. In other words, allow yourself to indulge in foods you love by consuming them in moderate portions when you have your meals, like when you're not in a triggered state. Because by satisfying your cravings in controlled amounts, you reduce the emotional charge that are attached to these foods, making them less likely to trigger overeating. So for an example, a woman in my workshop wanted to take the allure away from food. So she did this by making sure to enjoy something chocolatey with her tea after some of her meals. She would have something like a piece of chocolate, a few Oreos, or one of those, those pudding cups that we would have. This really helped make chocolatey foods feel less special for her. So when she was in an emotional state, those foods had less power over her. So there was less overeating on these foods. I know this may sound weird, but I actually want you to reflect on your relationship with these indulgent foods or these fun foods. Do you still treat them like the enemy? Is there space to peacefully incorporate these foods here and there so they're less demonized? For a lot of people, doing this could be a scary prospect, and I totally understand that. So if the idea of including these charged foods really freaks you out, let this be your sign to reach out to me for some support with this. As long as food seems scary, or as long as these foods seem like they have power over you, it may be a reason to reach out. And one of my favorite parts of helping people heal their relationship with food is reclaiming their power and feeling free in a world of foods of all kinds. So if this sounds like something that you'd like to experience in your lifetime, schedule a complimentary conversation with me using the link in the description if you haven't had one of these conversations already. It's part of my gift of having you in my community. Tip number 3 is learning how to mitigate your emotional eating episodes. So sometimes, despite your best efforts, you may still find yourself turning to food for comfort. In such instances, practicing mindful portioning by allowing yourself the desired food. This approach helps manage your emotions using food without totally derailing your progress. So an example of this was a client of mine who needed to process her emotions after a long day at work, especially during the wintertime. Telling her to not use food to process her feelings wasn't an option at this point in her recovery. So she would serve herself a serving size, and the time it would take for her to eat that food would take the edge off of her feelings to a level where she could actually tolerate them. So when she used food to cope, she didn't have all that excess guilt and shame to deal with as well, because she ate an amount that she could deal with. So what can you do to have food available for yourself that could take the edge off of the feelings in a way that feels safe? Consider having an individual size or individual portions if you're trying this methods. Luckily, grocery stores, coffee shops, and cafes offer these options, such as an individual scoop of ice cream, or those little containers that they sell of ice cream, or maybe having just a bar if you're feeling like you need something creamy, or having maybe those yogurt and granola parfaits that they sell if you need something crunchy. Or, if you want something salty, maybe one of those personal bags of chips or a mini cheese and cracker snack packs that they sell. I mean, there are infinite options available, and you can be totally creative. So to recap, the 3 ways you could use portion control to actually help you overcome overeating are to, number 1, eat adequate portions of nutritious foods during the day. This prevents getting too hungry and inadequate nutrition that could actually trigger overeating. Tip number 2 is eat reasonable portions of trigger foods to satisfy cravings and to prevent feelings of deprivation that could lead to overeating or binges. Tip number 3 is if you know you're going to use food to cope, because your emotional muscles aren't yet strong enough to feel whatever there is to feel, plan to have a portioned amount to prevent that endless eating. So I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please comment below on your favorite tip, or if there's anything you feel I left out. And don't forget to like this video and to share it with your friends, family, colleagues, clients that may find this video helpful. So thank you so much for watching. Happy eating, everybody. Bye.